Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving back into some entitled people stories. Today we've got 3 brand new stories, and on the surface, they don't seem related at all. One's about a kid treating a backyard like a personal adventure zone. One starts with a high school parking spot and spirals into something way darker. And one involves a neighbor quietly trying to rewrite a property line. Different people, different settings, different ages. But if you stick around, you'll notice they all collapse for the exact same reason. And that's what we're breaking down at the end. My backyard is not your kid's treasure island. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where everyone has roughly the same setup. A modest backyard, a stretch of grass, a few old trees that have survived multiple owners, and the occasional leaning shed that's seen better decades. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy. I keep my place tidy, mow regularly, and try not to be that neighbor. We're all on polite but not close terms. We wave, sometimes complain about the weather, exchange a few words about trash pickup, and then go back to our lives. 2 doors down lives a family with a kid who's maybe 9 or 10. Lately, he's gone full pirate. And I mean full pirate. Eye patch, cardboard sword, bandana. He shouts things like, "Ye be cursed," at squirrels, and runs around the block with the dramatic limp of someone who's watched too many movies. Honestly, at first, I found it kind of charming. Kids playing outside, using their imagination, not glued to a screen. Harmless, right? That's what I thought at first. Then I started noticing holes in my yard. At the beginning, they were small, little divots near the fence line. I assumed animals, raccoons maybe? We get them sometimes. I filled them in, shrugged it off, and moved on. But over the next week, the holes got bigger. One morning, I walked out back and nearly tripped because the ground behind my shed had been completely torn up. Grass clumps were scattered like someone had gone at the place with a shovel and zero plan. What really caught my eye, though, was the map. Pinned to one of my trees with a stick was a piece of notebook paper covered in crayon markings and a big X. I stood there staring at it for a solid minute, wondering if I was losing my mind or if I just wandered into a low-budget version of Goonies. Later that afternoon, I got my answer. I caught the kid in my yard, actively digging. He had a little plastic shovel and the most serious expression I've ever seen on a child's face. I cleared my throat so I wouldn't startle him. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm, "what are you doing?" He looked up at me like I just interrupted a sacred ritual. Without missing a beat, he said, "I'm hiding my treasure." "No one must know. This is the perfect hiding spot." I took a breath. "Okay, but this is my yard. You can't dig here." He scowled, huffed dramatically, grabbed his shovel, and ran off without another word. I figured that was the end of it. Kids push boundaries. You correct them, life goes on. Nope. The next morning, there was a brand new hole, bigger than before, and this time something was sticking out of the ground behind the shed. I dug it up and found a 10 lunchbox half buried. Inside were Pokemon cards, plastic jewels, toy coins, and a few crumpled $5 bills. Actual money. At that point, I knew I couldn't just ignore it, so I walked the lunchbox over to his house and knocked. His mom answered, already looking annoyed like I'd inconvenienced her just by existing on her porch. I explained calmly what had been happening, showed her the box, and told her son had been digging holes in my yard. She sighed heavily, not apologetically, annoyed. "Well, he's just using his imagination," she said. "I think it's sweet." She tried to move the boundary from "don't dig in my yard" to "you're crushing creativity." She tried to turn a simple property issue into a moral one, so you'd look like the bad guy for even bringing it up. She made it about feelings instead of facts. "I don't mind the imagination," I replied. "I just don't want holes dug in my yard." She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them. "Can't you just let him have this? It's not like your grass is that nice anyway." That one hit me sideways. I stood there for a second, genuinely stunned. I told her, still politely, that I didn't want someone else's kid digging on my property. I handed her the lunchbox and left before the conversation got uglier. That should have been it. That night, my phone buzzed with a long text from an unknown number. It was her. She went on for paragraphs, said I humiliated her son, said I crushed his imagination, said I created an environment where children can't feel safe being children. According to her, he cried for over an hour and now thinks I'm the villain in his story. Yes, she actually used those words. I didn't reply. I sat there reading the message twice, trying to figure out when "please don't dig holes in my yard" became a personal attack on childhood itself. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't insulted him. I hadn't thrown anything away. I returned his stuff. All I did was set a boundary. Over the next few days, I noticed her watching me whenever I was outside, arms crossed, that look people get when they think you're the unreasonable one. I also noticed the kid glaring at me from their driveway, clutching his cardboard sword like he was waiting for the final showdown. So I made things very clear. I installed a small sign near the back fence, nothing aggressive, just "private property, please do not dig or enter." I also filled in every hole, reseeded the grass, and took photos. Documentation never hurts. 2 days later, I found another map taped to a tree on their side of the fence. Apparently, the treasure had been relocated. Funny how that worked. A week after that, she cornered me while I was taking out the trash. She told me I could have been a hero and chose not to be. I told her I'm not interested in being a supporting character in her kid's fantasy, especially when it involves property damage. She scoffed and walked off. Here's the salty part. A month later, the same kid was digging holes in another neighbor's yard. That neighbor did not play nice. They called the HOA. The HOA fined them. Suddenly, imagination had boundaries. Now my yard is intact. No holes, no maps, no treasure. The pirate phase seems to have sailed elsewhere. His mom doesn't look at me anymore, which I consider a win. I don't hate kids. I don't hate creativity. I just don't think being a kid includes destroying someone else's property and then insulting them for objecting. If that makes me the villain in someone's story, I'll take the role, as long as it stays on their lawn. The HOA fine proved that your boundary wasn't a personal vendetta. It was just the most basic rule. When another neighbor forced the same rule through a fine, it validated your position completely. The fact that the pirate phase sailed elsewhere shows the mom finally learned that creativity doesn't give you a free pass to wreck other people's stuff. And our second story. Apparently the parking spot was lucky and my daughter was the curse. My daughter gets to school early most mornings, but not early enough to be picky. Like every other student with a parking permit, she takes whatever open spot she can find in the student lot and goes about her day. There are no assigned spaces, no painted names, no signs, just first come, first served. It's been that way since the school opened, and every student knows it. Or at least every student except one. Last Friday, my daughter pulled into an open spot near the building. As she was shutting off her engine, another car whipped in behind her and started laying on the horn. When my daughter looked up, she saw the head cheerleader glaring at her through the windshield. The girl leaned out her window and snapped, "Excuse me, you're like in my spot." My daughter, who's never been one to rise to nonsense, calmly replied that it wasn't her spot, that there were no reserved parking spaces, and that she hadn't even seen the cheerleader parking there all year. That apparently wasn't the answer the girl wanted. She huffed, sped off, and found another place to park further away, which seemed to be the real crime. That should have been the end of it, but entitlement rarely stops at mild inconvenience. Once inside the school, the cheerleader marched straight up to my daughter at her locker and demanded she go move her car immediately. She added that if my daughter didn't comply, she would just call a tow truck. My daughter told her, again politely, that towing wasn't happening and that walking a few extra minutes wouldn't injure her legs or end her cheer career. At that point, a teacher walked past and asked what the problem was. The cheerleader instantly shifted into victim mode, claiming her spot had been stolen and that she was being disrespected. The teacher didn't even hesitate. She reminded her that there were no assigned parking spots and told her to stop making a scene over something so trivial. My daughter closed her locker and headed to homeroom, thinking the whole thing was over. It wasn't. When my daughter came back to her locker later, she found several notes taped to it. Crude, childish things. Parking space thief. Learn your place. One even had a little drawing of a car with an X through it. That was when my daughter finally had enough. She went straight to the principal's office and reported the harassment, explaining the parking situation and the confrontation both in the lot and at her locker. Not long after, the PA system crackled to life. "Will cheerleader's name please report to the principal's office?" The timing was perfect. I can only imagine how that conversation went, but judging by the cheerleader's face when she returned to class later, it didn't go the way she expected. For context, some people later suggested this was about social status. The cheerleader saw herself as the queen bee and assumed everyone else should fall in line. What made that theory especially funny is that my daughter's the captain of the girls' soccer team. The difference is that she doesn't weaponize it. She leads her team, shows up to practice, and doesn't demand special treatment because of a title stitched on a jacket. I thought the situation had finally been handled until a few days later when I was checking the mail. A car came speeding down the street and slammed to a stop near me. Before I could even react, I took my phone out and hit record. The door flew open and out came the cheerleader's mother, clearly already in a rage. She stormed toward me and demanded to know what is wrong with your daughter for taking her daughter's parking spot. I slipped my phone into my pocket so it kept recording and calmly told her the same thing the teacher and principal had already explained. The school doesn't assign parking spaces, and it's first come, first served. She scoffed and said that wasn't the point. According to her, the daughter needed that spot. When asked why, she leaned in and said, completely serious, that the spot was lucky. She explained that her 3 older kids had all parked in that same spot years ago and had good luck because of it. Good grades, good colleges, good outcomes. In her mind, that patch of asphalt was basically a magical charm, and my daughter had stolen it. She went on to say that without that spot, her daughter's future could be ruined, that she might not get into the college she wanted, and that this was all my daughter's fault. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud or mocking, just genuinely incredulous. I told her that luck is what you make for yourself, not something tied to a parking space. I turned to leave thinking that was the end of the conversation. When the mother revealed the lucky spot superstition, she showed you the engine driving this whole mess. The belief that a parking space could secure a child's future explains why both mother and daughter reacted so violently. You were messing with a family ritual. That's when she screamed after me, "Your daughter better watch herself on the soccer field and around school. I'd hate to see her have what happened to Nancy Kerrigan happen to her." I froze. Once I was safely inside my house, I checked the recording. I had every word, clear as day. The threat, the context, everything. I immediately contacted the school and the police and provided them with the audio. The principal was horrified. The police were less amused and said they would handle the mother directly. The cheerleader was called back into the office again the next day. My daughter was excused from class to give her statement, and school administration made it very clear that any further harassment by the student or her family would result in serious consequences. The mother, I was later told, received a very direct visit from law enforcement about making threats, even joking ones. My daughter's getting a dash cam installed in her car, and the school's monitoring the situation closely. The cheerleader hasn't said a word to her since. She parks farther away now, like everyone else. Funny thing is, my daughter's soccer team went on to win their next 2 games. No curses, no bad luck, just effort, teamwork, and preparation. Turns out asphalt isn't magic after all. And our last story. Lawyer neighbor tried to quietly claim half our backyard. My partner and I bought our first home less than a year ago, and like most first-time homeowners, we were equal parts excited and overwhelmed. It's a hillside property tucked into a quiet neighborhood with a long sloped strip of land running alongside our house. That slope borders a driveway easement our neighbors use to access their garage. Everything about it is clearly documented in our deed, the title report, and the disclosures. The hill is ours. The driveway is theirs. Clean on paper, at least. When we first moved in, the hillside was neglected, overgrown in places, uneven in others, clearly something the previous owner hadn't put much effort into maintaining. What we didn't realize right away was that our neighbors had taken it upon themselves to treat that hill like a shared space long before we ever showed up. At some point before we bought the house, they hired a gardener, planted several large ferns, a small tree, and even installed a sizable lawn sculpture halfway up the slope. None of this was disclosed during the sale, and because we were new and still settling in, we didn't immediately clock it as a problem. Not long after we moved in, we told them casually that we planned to take over maintenance of the hillside. It was friendly, neighborly, and honestly pretty low stakes at the time. They smiled, nodded, and didn't object. We assumed everything was fine. We were wrong. Their friendly smile and nod when you first mentioned taking over maintenance was a trick. They agreed in the moment to seem easygoing, but their behavior after that showed they never actually accepted it. Their casual trimming and comments about how much nicer it looked when they were managing it were their real response. As spring rolled around this year and we started actually working on the hill, trimming, clearing, stabilizing soil, the comments started. Every single time we were out there, one or both of them would wander over and tell us about how much money they'd spent on the plants, how long they'd been taking care of that area, and how much nicer it looked when they were managing it. More than once, we caught them trimming our bushes without asking, cutting things back in ways we hadn't discussed or approved. When we tried to steer the conversation toward property boundaries, they suddenly became vague, evasive, or changed the subject entirely. That's when my partner and I started getting uneasy. Out of curiosity and then growing concern, we started reading about adverse possession. The more we read, the worse it got. Continuous use, maintenance, improvements, open and notorious occupation. We realized that, intentionally or not, our neighbors had been behaving in ways that could support a future claim. What pushed us from concern to oh hell no was remembering who our neighbor actually is. He's a real estate lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who specifically handles boundary disputes and property issues for a living. The idea that someone with that background might be quietly treating part of our yard as his own set off every alarm bell we had. We didn't panic, we got organized. First, we ordered a professional survey. It confirmed exactly what our paperwork already said. The entire hillside, including the planted area and sculpture, is fully on our property. No ambiguity, no overlap, no gray zone. Armed with that, we informed our neighbors that we would be changing the landscaping on the hill to match the rest of our property and that we'd be taking full responsibility for its upkeep going forward. They were not happy. They immediately pushed back, saying the previous owners had given them permission to landscape the hill and that they'd spent a lot of money doing so. We listened, nodded, and then calmly explained that any permission given by a previous owner did not transfer ownership, possession, or permanent rights. We told them plainly that they were welcome to dig up and reuse any plants they wanted to keep. We were not trying to steal anything they had purchased, we just wanted our land back. What we would not be doing was reimbursing them for expenses they chose to incur in order to improve their own view. That conversation didn't go over well. When you found out your neighbor was a real estate lawyer, everything clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding about a hill. It meant he knew exactly what he was doing by planning and maintaining it. He was following the playbook for adverse possession, probably hoping you wouldn't notice until it was too late. That knowledge is what made you get the survey and act fast. To make sure there was absolutely no confusion now or in the future, we followed up with a formal letter. It was polite, precise, and very intentional. In writing, we stated that if they wished to tend to the landscaping on the hillside because it improved their view, they were free to do so only with our permission. We also stated clearly and explicitly that such permission did not grant possession, did not support any claim of adverse possession, and did not create or imply any easement or ownership interest whatsoever. Under no circumstances, now or later, could their actions be construed as rights over our property. We had the letter delivered properly and kept copies. Their response was frosty. They complained again about the money they'd spent. They implied we were being unfair. They suggested we were ruining the understanding they'd had with the previous owners. What they didn't do was challenge the facts, the survey, or the letter. The avoidance stopped, the trimming stopped, the casual claim stopped. The lawn sculpture mysteriously disappeared a few weeks later. We went ahead with our landscaping plans. The hill now matches the rest of our yard, is properly stabilized, and is maintained on our schedule. The neighbors still use their driveway easement, and we've never interfered with that in any way. We wave when we see them. We're civil, but there's a very clear line now, legally and socially. Looking back, I don't think this was an innocent misunderstanding. I think it was a slow, quiet attempt to normalize something that didn't belong to them, possibly with the hope that time and silence would do the rest. If that's the case, they picked the wrong house to try it with. So yeah, 3 stories, 1 theme: boundaries. One story shows you how entitlement starts. It's just a kid. One shows entitlement escalating through social power. My kid deserves special treatment. And one shows entitlement with paperwork potential. We'll just quietly treat it as ours. If I had to pick a winner for most satisfying overall, I'm giving it to the lawyer neighbor one. because the response was clean, legal, and future-proof. But I want your vote. Which one is the best story? Pirate treasure, lucky parking spot, or lawyer land grab? And which character annoyed you the most? Thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.